Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. So today's video is probably gonna be a long one because it's my TBR update slash book haul for the second quarter of 2021. Basically with what I did with the first quarter is that I briefly talked about the books that I had read from my physical TBR, and I talked about the new books that I had added to my physical TBR and the general progress. And as I mentioned in the previous video, my hope was to actually decrease the number of books that I own that I hadn't read, which I have managed to do despite the fact that I've bought more books in the second quarter than I did in the first one. And the reason for that is that I've been unhauling books as well. I go through my shelves regularly, and whenever I come across a book that I don't have any interest in, I get rid of it. But this, I felt like I needed a proper look through, and usually I leave that to when I have more time to really dedicate to look through my shelves. And so I've been doing that recently. The number of books I started the year off with was 451, and at the moment I'm at 422. So as I said, because I've been unhauling books, and I don't use unhauling as a strategy to be able to buy more books. It's just been happening that way. And I think it's a lot of the reason that I've been unhauling books is because it's books that don't really reflect my current interests anymore, especially because I've been navigating more towards translated literature and nonfiction. Those are my main two areas that I'm interested in. So I'll just briefly show you the books that I've read from my physical TBR, and that I've already talked about most of these, the ones that I haven't read in June. So Not to Read by Alejandro Zambra was one of the books that I read in March, and so far it is my favorite book of this year. The Valley of the Center of the World by Malahi Talak was one of the books I read in April, and I have talked about this several times because I really enjoyed it. The audiobook of this one is especially good, and this is an author I definitely want to read more from. We have Untold Night and Day by Suah, and again, an author that I'm interested in reading more from because I really enjoyed this one. And as you will see in some of the new books, I have actually bought another of her books since. Another book I read in April was The Enlightenment of the Green Gage Tree by Shukra Azar, and this has also made me want to read more Iranian authors, or I think just reignited that interest. We have Turning by Jessica J. Lee, which is again a book that is by an author that I'm interested in now and reading more from, and I have just started her second memoir. This one is about swimming, which obviously I loved, and I read it in April in preparation for the Springathon. And this one, the next one I read very recently, that is Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata, and this is a Japanese classic that I finally got around to because of a buddy read I did of this. And then we have Call of the Undertow by Linda Cracknell, which is one of the books I read for the Springathon in May. And then we have The Hidden World of the Fox by Adele Brand, another nature book that I read in the upcoming weeks of the Springathon. So the rest of the books that I've read from my physical TBR are all books I've read in June. So I'll just show you these here. I will be talking about them very soon for my June wrap-up. On to the portion of this video that is going to be the long one, and that is all of the new books and my book haul for the second quarter of 2021. So we have Absent by Betool Khedairi. This one is translated by Muhayyaman Jamil. This is an Iraqi author, and that is the reason I heard about this one, and I really wanted to read it for Invisible Cities in March, but I couldn't get a hold of it until I think I tracked this down in May and got it shipped from the US. So I haven't gotten to it yet, but I'm hoping to do a little bit of a catch-up of Invisible Cities reading over the summer, and this is one of the ones that I'm hoping to get to. For that, it is a book about a young woman's coming of age in Iraq, and I think it's going to be interesting. I've read a sample of this and really enjoyed the writing style. Next we have an Iranian classic, and that is The Blind Owl by Sadegh Hedayat. This is translated by Naveed Nouri. And this is an Iranian classic that actually came up in Suah's Untold Night and Day. And that was the reason I finally decided to pick this one up. I've wanted to read it for several years. It's been described as Kafkaesque. From all of the things that came up in the Suah book, I was even more intrigued. So I'm hoping to get to this one very soon. The next one we have is a fun sounding nonfiction that I just stumbled upon in my local bookstore chain sale, and it is called Death on the Cheap, The Lost B-Movies of Film Noir by Arthur Lyons. It sounded like fun. I had a period of my life that I was watching a lot of noir movies. A few years ago, and so I thought this would be a fun book to maybe even inspire me to watch more noir films, because I haven't in a while. And I've been looking for nonfiction books on film, especially sort of classic film and directing, and I don't really know where to start because it's an area that I haven't read anything about really. So this just sounded like it might be a good entryway for me. The next one I mentioned recently, and that is 50 Sounds by Barton. And this just came out in April. It is a essay collection on the Japanese language, written by an author who is actually a translator of Japanese to English. And I'm going to be buddy reading this with Roxy in August. I'm really looking forward to it. This one I've definitely mentioned before, and that is Fathoms, The World in the Whale by Rebecca Giggs. And I read about a third of this through the audiobook, and I just never got around to returning to it. I have set it aside for the moment because I'm reading other nature books at the moment, but I definitely want to return to it maybe later in the summer. This one I was so excited to finally pick up because, again, it was in the same sale as the noir book, and that is, let's see, New Penguin Parallel Text Short Stories in Japanese, edited by Michael Emmerich. I feel like I recognize his name as a translator from Japanese into English. Anyway, it is pretty much self-explanatory. It's an anthology of Japanese short stories that have parallel text with Japanese and English, and I've been wanting to get this one because I figured, first of all, it will probably be an inclusion of some authors I haven't read before or that have no other works available in English, which is one of the things I love about anthologies. Like anthologies from other countries, and the other reason is that I figured it would eventually be a good reading practice type volume to have. I've re-kicked my learning of kanji, and I'm not anywhere near being able to read these because they are short stories for adult readers, so I'm not on that level of kanji reading yet, but I figured it would be in the future definitely a possibility. This one, again, from the same sale, I hadn't heard of this one at all, and it sounded fantastic. It's called Bloodied and Unbowed, a memoir of the Ashur and Ashalois Yusuf family by Anais Nazarian. Translated by Ishkan Jimbashian. It seems like it's just a family history type nonfiction from an Armenian family, and I'm interested in part because there's some overlap with Persian history. It's very much in my area of interest in general. I want to read more Middle Eastern authors, especially in translation. And family history is something I'm always interested in. Another book I've mentioned before is Waterlogged by Roger Deakin. This is a swimming nonfiction, and hopefully another one I will get to this summer or the next summer. I would really like to read it soon, but I have so many books I would like to read soon, so I'm not going to make any promises. But yeah, it's a swimming writing classic, which is one of the reasons I've been putting it off, because I wanted to read some other books before I got to those books that people seem to really love. And this one seems to be that. The main reason I got this at the moment is because it was mentioned in, or referenced in Turning by Jessica J. Lee that I mentioned before. Then we have the Suah book I mentioned. This is Nowhere to be Found, translated by Sarah Kim Russell, and Sarah Kim Russell is definitely a name I recognize as an author, although I haven't read anything by her either. And this one is very vaguely described. So it says a nameless narrator passes through her life searching for meaning and connection in experiences she barely feels. And it seems like it's just a very introspective type novel. And to be honest, I was already planning to read anything by Suah, and this one seems to be quite popular out of her books, so I just figured it would be as good a place as any to start or to continue on with her bibliography. I went to one of the local secondhand shops for the first time in several months earlier during the spring, and I picked up a few books from there. So we have The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, which is a gothic sort of historical fiction novel. I've watched the movie adaptation, so I know the general vibe of the book, but I'm also interested in trying out Susan Hill's writing because it sounds like something I could really enjoy. Then we have Bob Dylan, The Chronicles, Volume 1. So I didn't really have any interest in this one or Bob Dylan specifically before I read the book. What is it called? It's a Swedish memoir by Filomena Grandin about her relationship with her father. Glöm allt men inte mig is the Swedish title. And her father had a connection to Bob Dylan, and there was several pieces of the memoir that specifically talked about him. So when I came across this book in the secondhand shop, I was kind of intrigued to learn more about him, to get that other perspective. Another book I picked up in the secondhand shop is Being Mortal, Illness, Medicine, and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande, and I've heard amazing things about this for several years. It's kind of a medicine classic, medicine nonfiction classic, and I've never read this author before, so I'm definitely interested in this one. I think it's about the aging aspect specifically, and how to deal with an aging population and what we consider quality of life and all of those things. Definitely things I'm interested in, so there's that. And then probably the best find of that visit is this 2-volume set of Anais Nin's Diaries that I've wanted to read for years. I think I first heard about them through Gilmore Girls. If I'm not mistaken, Rory is reading them. I just have a feeling I will enjoy these. I have a feeling I will get on with her attitude, so we'll see. I'll definitely report back when I've read them. Then I have 4 books that I picked up from because they were longlisted for the Booker International this year. And I haven't read any of them, although I've started one, and that one is in the Inventory of Losses by Judith Schlansky, translated by Jackie Smith. And this was also on my translated literature releases from last year that I'm excited to read. I'm not sure what exactly I named the video. But this is that sort of mix of fiction and non-fiction, fragments, history, memory, nature writing mix of things that sounds exactly like my kind of thing. I've read, I think, 1 or 2 stories of this or chapters of this, and so far I've enjoyed it for sure. I haven't really dived into this one because I've been reading so many other things, and it feels like the kind of book I need to be completely concentrating, so that's the only reason I haven't been continuing on with this one and set it aside for a moment when I've sort of cleared my deck of currently reading books. So there's that. And then we have Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, translated by Elizabeth Jacquet. This one I've heard really good things about from several people recently, and especially Jasmine Alexa has done a fantastic review of it, which I will link below. And I was interested in this one since it came out, but especially because it was long listed, and then also it's published by Fitzgeraldo, which I mean is one of my favorite publishers for sure. And then we have a short story collection. This is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana and Enriquez, and this is translated by Megan McDowell, of course. I read her other short story collection, Things We Lost in the Fire, in January or February. January, I think. And so I was already interested in picking this one up, but I used the long list announcement as my excuse to finally buy it. And her short stories seem to talk a lot about women, women's place in society, and sort of gender expectations and things like that. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in seeing what this short story collection is like. And then this one is probably the one of the Booker International that I'm most intrigued about at the moment, and that is When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labutut. And it is translated from the Spanish by Adrian Nathan West. It is, again, supposed to be a blend of fiction and nonfiction, essay, fragments, things related to science, which, I mean, again, we're talking about things that very much appeal to me. And I'm even more intrigued by it now because Roxy talked about this one in, I think, her April reading wrap-up. I will link that in the description below. And the way she talked about it made me want to put it to the top of my list. Put it to the top of my list of priority things to get to. We're closing in on the end. The next one is a poetry collection, which is not usually my vibe, but it connects with something else I've mentioned here. So it is Faces of Love and the Poets of Shiraz. Translated by Dick Davis. Persian poetry. I don't think I need to say anything more. That is the reason I'm intrigued by this one. Kind of wanted to get a sense of these poets that so often come up in relation to Persian literature, and sort of understand their legacy better. Even though, as I said, I'm not usually a big poetry reader, and I very, very rarely buy poetry. The next one I'm hoping to get to before the year is over. I'm not sure when exactly that will happen, but that is Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. And this is supposed to be a sort of stream of consciousness style novel, where you're very much in the mind of the protagonist that, from what I've heard, is dealing with anxiety, or has a lot of anxiety at least. And the anxiety aspect was the thing that really drew me to this one. Although I've heard really interesting reviews from people, I wouldn't necessarily have decided to commit to such a big book unless it had that theme that I have a personal connection to. I'm kind of slightly intimidated because I'm worried about how it's going to affect me, but I also have a feeling that I will connect to it on a personal level. So that is the reason I've been very, very drawn to this one. Next we have Mr. Palomar by Italo Calvino. So this author I've never read before, but one of the reasons I actually picked this one up is, first of all, it was on the sale that I mentioned previously with the other books. So that is the reason I specifically heard of this one. But Italo Calvino wrote the book Invisible Cities that we've named our whole reading project from. And so I've been wanting to read one of his books for a while. But also this one sounded really fun. So it says, like the space telescope that shares his name, Mr. Palomar is a dedicated watcher, a seeker of the cosmic as it relates to the commonplace. Whether contemplating the movement of stars and planets from his apartment terrace in Rome, the wheeze of a mating tortoise in a scenic Tuscan garden, or the mysteries of a fine Parisian cheese, the eponymous philosopher postmarks his travels with a series of meditations at once bright with curiosity and burdened by the limits of human perception. Sounds exactly like my kind of book, so I'm very, very intrigued. And as I said, I hadn't heard anything about this specific book by him, so yeah, maybe one I will get to soonish. Then we have two last books, and they are both memoirs. The first one is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, and this one I picked up because of Mariam from Another Book Thought. This is a Korean-American writer talking about her mother, I think, or her relationship with her mother after her mother passes away. I was already interested in this one because it's a memoir, and from the Asian American perspective, or sort of anything related to immigrant stories and biracial experiences is something I'm increasingly drawn to, as I mentioned previously with the immigrant stories recommendation video I made a while ago. I think mainly because I'm trying to find more stories that I can relate to from my own experiences. But also the thing that really made me want to pick this one up is because of the food theme. That from the samples sounded like something I could really love. The way she talks about food and how it relates to her relationship with her mother, and how food can convey love and memories and connection. So connection to identity, connection to family. Yeah, I have a good feeling about this one. Lastly, we have Things I Don't Know, Things I Don't Want to Know by Deborah Levy, and I've been wanting to read her nonfiction for ages. I read one of her fiction books, was it the year before last, 2019, I think, and I didn't like that one. I didn't like that one very much, but I've been wanting to read one of her memoirs for since then, and wanting to try it and see if I like her nonfiction more than her fiction writing. And I have so many people whose taste I trust talk so fondly of this author, and so I really wanted to give it a go. And I read a sample of it and loved it. So again, I'm hoping that this will sort of change my attitude towards Deborah Levy. So those are all of the books that I wanted to share with you today. All of the books I've read from my physical TBR, all of the new ones that I've added to my physical TBR. The goal I made for this quarter was to decrease my TBR, and I have done that, despite how that ended up happening. So this, the goal for the next quarter is to try to read slightly more than, to read a number of books slightly more than the number of books that comes in. That's the goal. We'll see what happens. I will keep you posted at the end of September, I suppose. And in September there's the book fair, so that's going to be interesting. But yeah, that was all I wanted to say. I would love to know if you've read any of these books that I've talked about here. If you have any TBR related goals for this year and how that is going. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon.